I'm on the phone with Microsoft and they're in my computer. And I said, "You've got a Mac." Think about that for a second.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
Welcome to episode 417 of the Help Me with HIPAA podcast. My name is David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Carden. What's up, Donna?
I'm hanging in there, David. How about you?
Yeah, I'm loving it. All this nasty hot weather coming through.
I know, we can't be happy.
Oh, I'm happy. I love it.
Walking
out the door, getting smacked in the face with humidity.
I think I'll take that over cold.
Oh, I will too.
I'll take that over cold. I still to this day appreciate the statement one of my nephews who grew up in Syracuse made when this young Southern guy was like, "I think I want to live up north where it gets really cold." And I said, "So you want to tell him how that really is when you live up there?" And he goes just as flat as he can he has great delivery. He said, "Oh, it's not too bad until it freezes your soul."
Yeah, no.
I love the delivery, man. It's all about that.
Yeah, when I see people up north like having to shovel their way out of like a 6-foot snowfall,
yeah,
like, there's no way.
I'm screaming. Man. You can move.
I'm out.
That's just too cold.
But speaking of digging yourself out of stuff, today we'll be talking about the Verizon data breach incident report.
Yes, their annual report, which lets us see what's really going on out there so that we actually are making decisions with data.
Yeah. Yeah, just like all the reports and things that we go over, we want to look for what's happening, what's trending, what are the bad guys doing, what are sometimes the good guys doing or not doing.
How can we do things better? And, where do I invest in?
Yeah, that's always one of my questions. Like, let's pick the 80-20 rule here. Like if I've got to pick the thing that I work on, the 1 to 3 things that I work on, where do I need to focus?
Mm-hmm.
And did it change from last year to now? And so those are things I'm always looking for. My clients are always asking similar type questions like, where should I focus? Whether it's focus my efforts or focus my money or whatever. And those are the answers I need to have for them. So if you're not paying attention to these things and you're in IT, don't see how you can function.
Well, and even if you're not in IT and you're getting recommendations from people, this is what you want to use to make your decisions about who you should listen to.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not watching the wind, you're going to go right into the storm.
Yeah, well, we're also going to bring up a little bit later things about how things should happen, for example, in patching, and we'll talk more about it in a little bit. But you need to kind of understand as either a business owner or an IT, whatever you're in, you need to kind of understand what that looks like and how that might have to change depending on the circumstance.
Mm-hmm. There's some interesting stuff in there about that.
Yep. But before we dive into all that, we do want to say thank you to the people who listen. All 20 million of you, we are listening to you as well. So thanks. Thanks for those who donate. We appreciate that. If you're interested in donating to this podcast, let us know. Head on over to helpmewithhipaa.com to find out more.
Yay.
All right. So one of our new segments we've started doing is HIPAA Briefs, where we will take something within 60 seconds or less and break it down for you.
Yeah, I'm not going to put on the timer, but we're going to go for that. So this is one that is quickie, that'll lead you into a lot of rabbit holes. But what is an NPP? Who needs them? And where do you have them? The Notice of Privacy Practices is the NPP. It is a requirement under the privacy rule for covered entities to disseminate the Notice of Privacy Practices to their patients. Covered entities include insurance companies as well as health delivery organizations and clearinghouses. Well, the clearinghouses don't deal with patients directly, so theirs is kind of weird. But when you get those mailings periodically from your health insurance company with a notice of privacy practices in it, it's because they updated them or you've switched to them. Now they got to send you one. Those kind of things. But most people see a notice of privacy practices as that thing you sign at the doctor, which is HIPAA.
Yeah.
So,
or the time that I sign them and it's like, sign here that you read the notice of your privacy practices. And I'm like, but you never gave me one.
I know. I always ask for them when they do that. I need to know where it is. Where is it? But there is a proposal to get rid of having to sign that you've seen them if they make sure that they place them prominently in their public areas like they're supposed to. So you go to the doctor's office and you should see it like framed and, or readily available, and then you can get a copy. And so that's one of my favorite things to do is just go in and see where it is. And if it's buried in some area or they don't even know where one is when I ask for a copy. So you should have one readily available there. And if they have an informational website, it should be readily available on the website. We often, that's the first thing we do a lot of times is just go look and see if it's there on the website, because that tells you whether or not they're paying attention. And the key, though, is when it gets complicated. What if you're a lab that you don't actually see the patients, but you're getting and you're doing the billing? And then what if you are referred to come into a facility where people are at a facility? So it gets complicated on who is responsible for this notice of privacy practices. But consider it, that moment is where HIPAA is initiated. So it's important to know where that is to understand who's responsible from the PHI from that point forward. How'd I do?
I think you did great. I'm down with MPP. Now, so our next segment, the HIPAA Say What segment, I think, what was it, 2 weeks ago or so? You and I are talking about coming up with some type of acronym.
Yeah, that it was a big turd, and I said I'm going to work on it to get an acronym. So we're not doing a HIPAA Say What. We're saying we did come up with an acronym that is a turd, so that now we can say an acronym that says, yes, it is a big turd. It is totally unbelievable royal disaster.
Yeah.
Ironically, we have totally unbelievable royal disasters on our hands from time to time. So it is what we will now call a turd.
Yeah. It doesn't fit the acronym, but we also have a lot of totally believable royal disasters. These are usually in the form of, I told you.
That are totally unnecessary royal disaster. Maybe that's what we need to make it. I like that one too.
Yeah.
Which gets to the I told you ones.
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
It's it's like when you work for a company before and you had an accident, they would always say, was this accident avoidable? I'm like, yeah, I could have stayed home today. I
always like it, in the tech world, whenever you do that, whoever left last, they were the one that caused that problem.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a developer, it doesn't matter. That problem is because they were there and they did it. So, yeah, get it.
Yeah. So in our world, a good question to always ask is, was it avoidable? And most chances, yeah, it was.
Exactly.
Was it unbelievable, unnecessary? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So this goes into the rest of our specific nomenclature with stay out of my breeches, knock me down and steal my teeth. And now we have it's a situation that is a turd.
Now you need to get a copyright on turd.
Yeah, that would happen, right? Too good to be true. All right. So, for those who are the FCC people, move along. It's not going to go away.
Well, I mean, it's a great segue into the actual data breach incident report because all of these were totally unnecessary rural disasters that makes up a breach report.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's very interesting. There are some things that I can't remember how the report put it, but basically, if you said that ransomware was still the number one thing, you would be lacking imagination and also correct.
Yeah. I did. And if you've never read one of these reports, you should. We always have a link to them and we tell you about it, but there is so much humor.
Yeah.
That, we get a kick out of reading it because it's funny. And you know how we feel about that.
Yeah. And some of the stuff would catch you off guard because you're like, I can't tell if they're being serious or making a joke here.
I'm not quite sure about that.
Yeah. So it is well written. It's one of the few reports that, you don't feel like you're kind of forcing your way through.
Yeah. Yeah. It is very interesting and well written so that you're sticking with it and you're getting that information that sticks with you.
Yeah. And Donna, you have to remind me when we get to the part of the report that talks about the reason why 1% of the people do the data breach in a larger business.
That was like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
Fine.
So let's kick it off. Can you believe what type, or here's you a question. Can you guess what type of attack is often very effective and extremely lucrative?
Social engineering. Because I read the report.
Social engineering,
Mm-hmm.
It's like they don't have to beat your defenses if they can just get you to tell them the information.
Yeah. And this is what they're saying is that, it's probably the reason business email compromise, BEC, which just dealt with one, they've almost doubled across the entire data set, meaning all industries, all sizes, everything, almost doubled business email compromise.
Yeah. I would say personally for my IT firm, of the breach things that we're involved in, it's 90 to 95% business email compromise. It's way by far above everything else.
You hate the call when it starts with, I got this email.
Yeah. And now I will say we do deal with breaches that are other things, but they tend to be non-clients. These are people that call and, hey, I don't do business with you, but I need help. And then it's something else. But we have our clients protected well, and so one of the few ways that people can actually get around our security is by having people just tell them, the login information or click on something and them do something they're not supposed to do. As much as we try to protect people for themselves, that's hard.
Well, but, social engineering is all about treating individual like somebody you want to trick, and people don't get that.
Mm-hmm.
Used to, we just had to do phishing tests. Now you don't. You got to do social engineering tests, which is way different and way more complicated. And you still have the frequent clickers on your phishing test. So what are you going to do with a frequent clicker that's also falling for the social engineering stuff on top of it?
You disconnect them from the internet.
I know, right? And so, they made it clear when you look at the breaches that are involved, and they're like 74% of all breaches include the human element, where people are actually involved in doing it. It's an error, privilege misuse or stolen credentials or social engineering. Somewhere in there, a person is 74% of the time.
So there you go. You can lower your breach by 74%.
If you have no people.
There you go.
So it is the overall big issue that we've talked about for years is securing the human, which is so hard to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And 83% of the breaches involved external actors and their primary motivation.
Money.
Oh, money. Overwhelmingly money.
I would hope so. I mean, what other motivation?
Well, there's some really nasty motivations out there of espionage and ideology and just to wreak havoc and just for the lulls of it, which is the other one we're talking about. So 95% of the time they're after money.
Mm-hmm.
And that is why we keep telling people that healthcare data is so valuable. I mean, you could sell that 4 or 5 times over.
Yeah.
And it's just ridiculous. So, but the 3 primary ways attackers access an organization, they steal credentials, they phish somebody, and then you have actual exploitation of vulnerabilities.
So let's hang on that for a minute. So the stolen credentials and phishing we've been talking about for 10 years. But the exploitation of vulnerabilities, it's not that it's something new, but we're seeing it a lot more nowadays. But we're also seeing the ability for smaller organizations to be able to actually do vulnerability management nowadays, which is something that really it was very difficult even 3 years ago for a small organization to do that because it was just not cost effective. So here's the rub though, is in order to not be exploited in the vulnerability area, you have to have good patching policies. Things have to be updated. You have to update firmware, software, all this other stuff. That we've talked about this endlessly, how it is a difficult thing to do. On top of all that, and we'll see here in a little bit, but some of this patching has to be done quickly. And it's typically not done quickly by default, because as an IT company, we want our patching to go through testing, to be whitelisted, to make sure we're not pushing out a patch to hundreds or thousands of endpoints that's going to break hundreds or thousands of endpoints. So there tends to be a lag, and sometimes that lag's a week or 2 weeks. And so if you've got a 0 day that comes out and it's going to take you 1 to 2 weeks to patch that, that's 1 to 2 weeks the criminals have the ability to attack you, and you're completely wide open with your pants down.
Exactly. And they really demonstrate that in the way they looked specifically into the Log4j vulnerability that happened last year. I think it was about this time last year. And what they found is that 32% of all the scanning activity looking for that vulnerability over the whole year happened within 30 days of its release, and the number 1 day where they were scanning for it was 17 days. So what does that tell you, David, as an IT provider responsible for patching?
I mean, I need to patch things quickly. You know, certainly in less than 2 weeks, I would say you got a day.
On some of these, like
honestly,
that one, yeah.
I mean, if it's spiking, I mean, you got a spike on day 17. And yeah, I mean, from day 1, it's already jumping up quickly. So, and that's the problem, because how long does it take, especially if you don't have IT, how long does it take for you to even know about these things? Because if you don't have IT people, you don't know, you probably still don't know about these things. I mean, of course, I'm preaching to the choir here because our listeners would know, but for those other folks out there in La La Land who think nothing bad happens on the internet, they don't have a clue. If you go to ask a lot of people, like, what is Log4j? I have no idea what it is. As a matter of fact, their systems are probably still vulnerable to it.
And it unfortunately you're probably spot on there. It is still vulnerable to it. And, but when you look at, there's so many people that, vulnerability management, it's no big deal. We do a scan once a quarter. And I'm like, huh? No, with these numbers,
no. We do
these numbers, you can't do it even once a month. You've got to do it continuously.
Yeah. No, we don't even do it once a day. We do it all the time. I mean, just constantly
looking for something to be there.
So, yeah. And it's, and we have to prioritize it, because you can't chasing vulnerabilities, man, it's a mess. And you'll spend all day long chasing vulnerabilities and patching vulnerabilities. So you have to prioritize. And that's why you look for things like this when it comes out and it says, hey, this is a critical, you got to patch it now kind of thing. And then that's when, fortunately, a lot of the tools we use, usually the vendors will push out something really quickly, like use this to scan for any type of Log4j vulnerability across your entire ecosystem. And so we're able to do that quickly and see who, if anybody, is affected by that, and then target those people to get them patched.
Well, I can assure you that this argument of we need to wait a couple of weeks needs to go to the wind. You have to have at least some scenarios. We're not talking like regular patches, performance. The security patches need to go faster, period.
Yeah. It's typically not a feature patch. I hate when some companies do that. They'll bundle all of it together, because a security patch is typically something that you can patch quickly and easily. Usually it's not going to break something, even though it can, but it's not like you're changing a feature or adding something to the operating system or software. But yeah, you're right. It needs to be something that's done quickly. I would rather have a machine go down because of the patch than to be hit with the payload of what it can do.
Absolutely.
In that vulnerability.
100% agree. And I've had that conversation just trying to get, I remember I was trying to get them to upgrade my PHP server on this is when I knew I needed to change website hosts several years ago. It was like, I need you, because this is no longer supported like as of Tuesday. And I'm not waiting. Well, you need to understand that this could make your site break and all that. And I'm like, you know what I do for a living? I would rather say my site is down because we're making sure it's secure than my site is down because it's been attacked.
Yeah. Which one's going to look worse on you?
And it was like, oh, okay. And it was like it never occurred to this person, because all they deal with are the people yelling because the site went down. Yeah. And I'm like, I do not care if you break it. Do it. Do it. Just do it.
Yeah. You are an anomaly.
I know. Well, in more ways than one. So, but that was a really interesting point that we picked up in that discussion about Log4j. And another thing that they pointed out was that whole external, internal, multiple, and partner. And we're like, we're used to seeing external, internal, multiple.
Yeah, partner?
Oh, at first I thought, they're monitoring supply chain. That was not what they said, David. And I'm like, I know what they said was like, can this even be a thing? Why would this even be a thing? And then you had the perfect, well, I don't know if you should say that stuff out loud where people would get it, but you have to play the long game here. But if you're playing the long game, there's you go in with this whole thing, but it's saying any third party sharing a business relationship with the organization, great. We get that. Vendors, outsource IT. Some level of trust and privilege is usually implied. Yes. And it says, note that an attacker could use a partner as a vector. That does not make the partner the actor. The partner has to initiate the incident, and they're looking at Where was the issue? Who initiated the incident in this particular, the threat actor? And I'm like, I shouldn't see my business partners being the threat actor.
Yeah, somebody you hired is actually
like
attacking you.
meaning to. There's like 1% of them, they have signed up, they've gotten me to enter into a business relationship, give them the access, and then they are the ones, it didn't come through them, they are the actor. I'm like,
It's a new business model.
And not a good one. We always talk about the insiders. We know about that. We know sometimes it can be a combo, but to think that my own partner initiated the incident, if that's even registering on the graph, it's a tiny number. It shouldn't even be on there. So,
but I do think it's interesting that when they talked about the types of people that would be partners, they said suppliers, vendors. So those are, very generic. But then they said hosting providers and outsourced IT support.
I know, right?
Specific.
I'm like,
it's like you did.
Are they attacking me?
Okay, what are you trying to tell me here?
I'm getting a little nervous.
I mean, you're going from something vague like suppliers and vendors to something very specific like hosting providers and outsourced IT support. So to me, if I'm reading between the lines, I'm starting to think maybe that's, where the problems are coming in.
I just can't even, there's a lot of times where we get involved and or we're either called in or we read about it or we hear about it from folks. And, a lot of those we don't even talk about because, but if I heard about one of those, I'd be telling everybody I know. So if you've heard about one of those, we would like for you to tell us because I was like, well, that seems awfully small if we're looking for supply chain, knowing what we know about supply chain. So then I go read it and I'm like, that's not what it's telling me. Yeah. So I fell off the rails for a minute and then David and I both went down a rabbit hole. And so that's why we need to move on. And guess what? Almost a quarter of breaches involved what kind of attack, David? Yeah, because they already told you. And I love that they say ransomware is ubiquitous among organizations of all sizes and in all industries.
Yeah. And, it's like Josh said last week, It's not going anywhere. I mean, my grandkids are probably going into college before that goes anywhere.
And they made a point in the report. They said that we had been anticipating that ransomware would soon be hitting its theoretical ceiling, by which we mean that all the incidents that could have ransomware would have by now, by a certain time. And everybody keeps saying that. But then it's like ransomware is present today in more than 62% of all incidents committed by organized crime actors. 59% with financial motivations. So I love the point. So sadly, there's room for growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's still too easy and too lucrative.
And
it's like, no matter what else you bring to the table, we can still make a lot of money doing this. We have not yet bled the turnip dry.
And they did, make some, there's one point, and this is it. I think it was at the end, but I wanted to bring it up here because then we're going to talk about healthcare. And I thought it was so telling. The next time you meet an incident responder in the wild, I meet him in my backyard, hanging out at a cookout. When you meet him in the wild, know that all that goes through their mind is, did the asset or copy of the data get out of the door? Confidentiality. Was it changed from a known and trusted state? Integrity. And do we still have access to it ourselves? Availability. Please offer them a word of kindness and a beverage because it is very tortured existence. If you're feeling cold, they are cold too.
Yes. Or as we like to say, everybody freak out
It
together.
is a tortured existence.
Yeah.
And it is just it's confidentiality, availability, integrity, CIA of the PHI that you cremate people.
Mm-hmm. Well, just think about it. Instant responder. This is something I used to tell people back when I was in law enforcement as a first responder. People don't call me and say, "Hey, can you drop by the house? Just want to tell you what kind of great job you did."
No.
I mean, everything you're responding to is an emergency, and it's bad things, and it's all kind of crazy, and you're walking into chaos, and it's every day, all day, every day. And this what instant responders do at a digital level. Like, you're not getting called because things are going right.
That's when people tell me, they say, I don't want to tell you this, but this such and such, I don't have a password on it. And I'm like, you're just going to give me a rash. Or more, one of the ones where everybody uses the same Wi-Fi network. Guest and everybody have the guest, employees, our workload, everything's on the same Wi-Fi network. That's not just a rash. I'm throwing up. I'm going to need to go to the hospital kind of stuff. But it's that meeting those people and not getting that clearly there's a reason they have this problem. Like a police officer. I get why a police officer would always know they don't get that call to say, hey, things are well. But most people don't get it that's what happens with tech people.
Most of the time, that is true.
And here's another one of their quotes that was good, talking about the confidentiality and all the different stuff that's involved. And personal data represents PII from your customers, partners, and employees. That's the one that usually gets companies the most in trouble with regulators, as more and more privacy-related laws are passed around the world. And then in parentheses, great line. Although medical data is a whole other ball of earwax.
Yes, it is.
I'm loving it. But the action vectors for ransomware, just before we get off of the ransomware madness and to go into it, action vectors meaning an action took place that precipitated the ransomware attack. What is the action someone took? Not how they got in, but the action someone took, they were doing. Email.
Still top of the list.
Desktop sharing software. RDP, people. RDP.
Yeah. Or, I had this problem, and so I'm on the phone with Microsoft, and they're logged into my computer to help me.
Let them in.
It's, the funniest one I ever had was when somebody told me that. I'm on the phone with Microsoft, and they're in my computer, and I said, "You've got a Mac." Think about that for a second.
But the top three: email, desktop sharing software, and web application. They trick you in some way with a web application that you're going to end up giving them everything. So, are you ready to move on to healthcare and what they brought up under healthcare?
Yeah, because it is the sector under siege. That was the
one first thing that they made a headline about. A sector under siege. That was both comforting and not at the same time.
Well, it goes back to the ease of use.
Their point is that we're highly targeted by ransomware games.
Yeah, but you might want to say that again. Not the highly targeted, but the ransomware gangs. Because I still hear people, why don't these guys just get a job? It's not guys. These are gangs of people. This is a organized crime. This is not some kid that can't get a job at Wendy's.
He's in the basement, right? No. This is their job.
Yeah.
They go to an office and, do their work.
I had somebody tell me last week, they said, just imagine all the good that these people could do if they would just get a reputable job. And I'm like, there's no money in that.
They're making a ton of money this way. Well, plus, and many of them, yes, we have a tax that originate here in the United States. That's not to say that's not the case. But many of them are in other countries. This is the best job you can get.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like, yeah, I'm going to make good money here. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and work from home.
They have them go in, so they can control the security around it too. So
yeah.
You have an office building and one whole floor is a ransomware gang, but they go by cybersecurity experts, Inc.
Yeah. Or maybe they're the IT company you hired.
Oh, don't want to think about that. So they did make a point, and this is something that we've noticed, that the number of incidents peaked in 2021. We had fewer in 2022. I don't know how this year's going to come out. But in the last 3 years, we've seen a jump in data breaches where the data is confirmed to have been stolen, as well as the encryption of the ransom done. And, I believe we really started seeing them do the additional, we're going to steal the data thing right at the end of 2019. We started seeing it. We started talking about it. And since then, this has become the standard mode of operation if you get into a healthcare situation. They either see it's healthcare and bail because they have at least some element of honor, or they're like, oh yeah, now we can take the data.
Yeah. Yeah, this is something that we saw. And when we talk about ransomware changing, this is what they do. They change their tactics. They change how they do things. And as you said earlier, there's still room to grow because there's some things that I have yet to see that are possible that scare me even more. I'm almost scared to even talk about them because if somebody hasn't thought of it, I don't want to give them.
I don't. No. If we don't think about it, it won't happen, David.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those things. Certainly, somebody else has thought about this before now.
Yeah, and it is still now. The good news is, for several years, healthcare was the industry that had more attacks, more data breaches from internal than any other industry. I think that's leveled out a little bit. That has a lot to do with, actually monitoring things, which wasn't happening for a long time.
Right.
But they did point out, where's my gruntle?
Those are the employees you want to hire.
The gruntled, not the disgruntled. Ones. I would like to have all gruntle employees. And then you have the disgruntled one.
Can you ask that? Can you ask that on application?
Are you currently a gruntle employee? The industry's only defense for when someone loses their gruntle is fast detection of unusual data access patterns. This remains a challenge for any industry where internal actors are motivated to cause trouble.
Yeah, it is. When they on the inside, when they're calling from inside the house, it is difficult.
And that's why, you can't just look at this one thing. Well, we're monitoring for a login attempt problems, and if we don't see that, we know we're good. You don't see login attempt problems when it's coming from within the house.
Yeah.
You see them accessing things they shouldn't at a time that they shouldn't.
We're monitoring people that are using the front door with a key.
And as long as everybody that comes in has a key, we have no security problems.
You're good. Yep.
None. Which gets back to stolen credentials as well as anything else. But you have to watch for that unusual data access pattern, which is why, we have Ray on from time to time, and we talk about Sphere. We talk about, there's other products out there. We just have a relationship with them because Ray likes to tell jokes like we do. And the bigger issue is always going to be, if you assume just because somebody's worked there for 10 years that they are not going to, for some reason, no longer be a gruntle, you're not paying attention. So please accept that not all employees are gruntles. The final bit here is, oh, David, I'm a small business. I don't need to worry about these things, these incidents and attacks and data breaches. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What does this report have to say to them?
Wrong.
Yep. In fact, it literally says SMBs are no different than any other business. The fact that SMBs and large organizations have increasingly become similar to each other when it comes to these things. I love they call it a phenomenon. It's a UAP.
Yeah.
This began several years ago, and by now there is so little difference based on organizational size that we were hard-pressed to make any distinction whatsoever.
Wow.
So instead of that, they said, look, we can't even, we got nothing. You're the same. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, here's some things. And they use the sys controls, which Center for Internet Security. It's a long story. We talked about them before. And so they point out that with the sys controls for a small business, which we could not find firm information on what that is, but we can tell you if you have nothing in place, regardless of your sector, whatever industry, it's a good point to know that this is control group 1 for the sys controls, and they recommend, guess what? Things that we talk about, David.
Mm-hmm.
Security awareness and skills training, right up there at the top. Data recovery.
Yep.
Because you got to know, but you got to know what you got. There's a lot of things that get you there. And access control management.
Yep. And let me hammer this because I always do. It doesn't say data backup. It does not say data backup. For those of you in the back, it does not say
do not
data backup. It says data recovery. You must establish and maintain data recovery practices sufficient to restore in-scope enterprise assets to a pre-incident and trusted state. You don't know that if you're just doing backups.
Preach it.
Okay. Put my soapbox
Preach it,
down.
brother. Preach it.
Stop buying backup.
I agree. Hear, hear. So while we did talk about vulnerabilities, and it is important, a lot of small businesses don't have highly complex software. And if they simply turned on the auto update in Windows, it would get a bunch of them, and Adobe. Just update it whenever. But just make sure you're updating. Then that is easily managed for those, what we call tiny businesses. But once you get up there in the next size level, you got to add like incident management and a lot of these other things that many people don't even think about. And if you're in healthcare, all of these things apply. All of this.
Yeah. And the other tricky part about vulnerability management is that's also a way that you are attacked through something that is given to you as a vulnerability. In other words, you'll have something pop up on your screen that says your machine's vulnerable, or we found something that needs to be done. Not necessarily we found porn, even though that could be a vulnerability. But just as an example, this still happens. You go to certain websites that you probably shouldn't go to, or that are questionable websites. They're not necessarily pornography sites, or just questionable. They're where you can download free software instead of paying for it, stuff like that. They will still have pop-ups that pop up and say, you need to update Adobe Flash player or whatever. And I mean, you and I know, you see that and you're like, Flash player?
Nay.
Seriously?
If it is running Flash, you don't want to use it.
I mean, come on, Flash player? They blocked that a long time ago. But that's the thing you see, because when you hear me and her say something like, update Adobe, and then all of a sudden, next thing you know, you see something pop up on your screen, it's like, update Adobe Flash. You're like, oh, I remember David and Donna talking about updating Flash. And so you got to be extremely careful, which is, again, why when we take on a client, we turn off all the automatic updates, and all the updates have to run through us. They can't do anything unless we're pushing it out, managing it. Everything has to go through a single point system so that we can keep people from doing things that can cause problems.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. I mean, we don't understand how anybody functions anymore with no technical knowledge.
No, even with technical people, if it's a technical person who doesn't have a good grasp on privacy and security, they're not doing you much good.
Just because you understand technology doesn't mean you know how to secure it.
We've got a client that's fairly new, and they have an on-site level 1 technician, and we're constantly talking to him about, I understand that you can do that, but you shouldn't do that. Or, and he's wanting to know, how can I do these things to make things easier? And how can I do this to make this thing easier? And he's frustrated because we have security in place, and security slows down what he wants to do sometimes. But that's the difference between coming at something from a security first mindset versus from I got to fix it first mindset.
Let's start in the middle. No. That gets you at the wrong end.
Yep. So, of course, one of the things he hates is the fact that, any software that gets installed has to be approved by us. It won't run unless it doesn't need admin credentials. But, he's like, is there some way we can just download everything that we need to install on machines and just run it? We can just have users click on stuff. And I'm like, I don't want users clicking on stuff. I don't want them to ever install anything, because then they get in the habit of installing, and then they're like, oh, I can just do this myself. And next thing you know, what they did at home, this didn't cause any problems at home. So they go try to do it at work.
Yeah, it caused problems at home. You just didn't know it.
Yeah, you don't know it yet. Or, I need to do this thing, but I don't have a way to do it. So let me install this free version of fill in the blank so I can do it.
Yeah,
that's
it
a challenge.
Well, even us, we're out there sometimes.
Right, there you go.
Have you seen this? Have you looked at this? Have you studied this? And you get all excited, and then you're like, wait a minute, this might be sketcy. I'm like one of the red pandas where they stand up and back away. I'm a red panda. I'm a red panda. Oh, jeez.
Yeah, that's what you should create a company, call it Red Panda Cyber.
I like it.
The picture.
I love seeing those little things, though. They're adorable. It's a rock. Oh my God, it's rock.
The one thing we forgot to mention. So on the in the report, under the large businesses, it said that 1% of the data breaches occur because people just said it was fun.
It just seemed fun to do this.
Yeah, it was just fun. Yeah. So I did it.
It's just wrong in so many ways.
I know. I'm just like, oh, gosh. So anyway, if you see people having too much fun at work, you might want to ask questions.
Yeah, they're bored.
And if they're not gruntled and they're looking for fun, Even worse. All right, folks, that's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Be sure to share this out if you got value out of it and you liked it. And if you didn't like it, then just share it with a few more people. Remember for Donna and myself that HIPAA's not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.